Hey friends, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon. Like many of you, I grew up playing traditional JRPGs. At least, I'm assuming that applies to many of you. If you're watching my channel, that's probably true, yeah? I mean, hey, if you pretty much play Fortnite and you're just here because you like the cut of my jib, then by all means, welcome in. Although, if that was you, you clicked off the moment I said cut of my jib, so it was all for nothing. Anyway, point is, I have a real soft spot in my heart for traditional JRPGs. But that doesn't mean that's all I want to play. Maybe you're also like me in that way. You like to mix it up from time to time. Well, if that's the case, then stick around because I want to talk about JRPGs that break the mold, that do things a bit differently and get away with it because they're awesome. If that sounds appealing to you, then please consider subscribing and stick around for more stuff like this. And if I miss any, be sure to let me know down in the comments. Maybe I'm just being forgetful, or maybe I've never played your suggestion, and either way I want to know about it. Okay, let's get into it. You knew Nier Automata had to be on a list of mold-breaking JRPGs, so I figured I should just talk about it first. No reason to keep you in suspense. Yes, Yoko Taro's masterpiece is still basically unmatched in the action RPG arena, thanks in large part to just a freaking gem of a combat system developed by Platinum Games. Now, I wouldn't say that a game being an action RPG in itself should get it onto a list like this. But if you're at all familiar with Nier Automata, you probably know where I'm going. The gameplay is far, far more than just hacking and slashing, first of all, with tons of customization through adding chips to your character. These don't just affect your attack power or defense or whatever, though. You can find chips that unlock different parts of the HUD, or a chip that makes enemies scream when you hack them to death. Oh, that's hack as in computer hack, not like with a sword or something. Even beyond that sort of thing, though, the gameplay is pretty much never satisfied to just stay the same from moment to moment. Sure, you might start out running around a 3D world and killing robots, but pretty soon you're riding a roller coaster or turning into a jet to kill bad guys in the style of a 2D shoot 'em up. Like, that is bonkers. But it feels right at home in a world coming from Yoko Taro. He's a maniac. The story is also incredible, which it would almost have to be for me to love it as much as I do. Yoko Taro likes to think deep, and he wants you to think deep too. I suppose if you weren't in the mood for that, you could skip the cutscenes and just enjoy the gameplay, but don't do that. It's so good, you guys. And not only is the story good, but the way it's told is crazy too. This is a game where you're going to see the end credits multiple times, but not because you're playing through the same thing over and over. I guess to the truly cynical, it might seem like all the credit sequences were thrown in where they are as a sort of gimmick or trick, but I don't know. I think Yoko Taro is trying to tell us something. I might struggle to explain exactly what, but I like having my brain tickled that way. If you're in the market for just the straight up most bizarre sort of game that still manages to be masterpiece level quality, then you need to get a hold of Nier Automata. Okay, I need to be careful about how I talk about 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. I've offhandedly referred to it as a visual novel before, and let me tell you, some people did not appreciate that. At the same time though, I feel like I could make a strong argument for seeing it that way. But maybe the issue was that to call it a visual novel is to undersell it, or worse, maybe it miscommunicates what the game is doing. I also anticipate some people are going to have a problem with it being on a list of JRPGs as well, because the only JRPG gameplay it really has is its strategic battles, which are unique in part because of how separated they are from the rest of the game. Yeah, this is a pretty hard game to pigeonhole, but that's sort of what this list is all about, right? Anyway, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is one of the best science fiction stories I've ever experienced, and I don't say that lightly. Vanillaware is a super beloved developer, but to be perfectly honest, I haven't really fallen in love with any of their games before this one. I can recognize their quality and their appeal, but they just never were able to sink their fangs into me. But 13 Sentinels had me hooked, like straight away. There's something really special about this game, you guys, like the visual style to begin with. This is one of the most visually appealing games ever made. I know, I'm throwing around a lot of superlatives, that's true, but I mean it. The story is told from 13 different perspectives, which to me sounded like way too many and seemed like a recipe for confusion. And not only that, but the story is told in a completely non-linear way, and it involves time travel. But I never felt confused throughout the course of this game, at least not when the writers didn't intend for me to be confused. There are so many incredible twists in this plot, and the characters are all so engaging and unique and interesting. It's fantastic. It really, really is. I mentioned that the strategic battles are separate from the rest of the game, and that's one of the strangest aspects. Like, don't misunderstand me. I don't just mean they feel disconnected from the rest of the game. I mean, you literally go into a different menu and choose to go to the battles. The way it works is you have a certain degree of freedom to explore different characters' stories, but at a certain point, further progress gets gated off until you complete enough battles. These battles seem to take place in a completely different time period than the rest of the story for the most part. And finally getting to see everything come together is one of the best moments in the whole experience. You put together a battle team made up of your 13 characters, with each having one of a few different styles of mechs that are suited to different things, like ranged attacks versus close-up attacks, that sort of thing. It's not overly complicated, and I didn't exactly challenge myself, let's say. But it's entertaining, and especially if you're into strategy or tower defense sorts of games, you'll probably have a blast. And let me be clear, even if you do not enjoy that sort of gameplay, this story is worth putting the battles on easy mode and brute forcing your way through. Seriously, I mean it. It's incredible. I resisted playing Undertale for a long time. I think I was still stuck in that old school mentality that made it hard for me to imagine a game made by primarily one person was going to be any good. Clearly the game had charm. It's got that whole Earthbound lo-fi aesthetic going for it, the sort of graphical style that people complained about back in the 16-bit era, but that everyone's crazy for now. But there's so much more to this game than charm. Toby Fox had a vision, and it was a beautiful, focused vision. By doing almost everything himself, he was able to make that plan and stick to it. And in doing so, he created one of the best Japanese-style role-playing games of all time. The story walks the line between absurdity and profundity, and it does it as well or better than any other piece of media I've experienced. I legitimately can't think of a story that does it better. The story's helped along by the music, again by Toby Fox, and there are some all-time greats in this track list. He weaves themes in and out of different pieces of music so brilliantly that you can begin to see story threads in them, which is a skill that even some of the great JRPG composers don't really seem to have nailed down. But the thing that really makes Undertale a worthy part of a list like this is the gameplay, naturally. Battles are random here, and at first glance, they seem pretty traditionally turn-based. In fact, you can play through this game as a very standard turn-based RPG if you want to. There's some timed button presses to maximize damage, but otherwise, it's what you'd expect it to be. But that's really not how you're supposed to play Undertale. No, at its core, Undertale is a game about pacifism, about ending cycles of violence. If that seems like a heavy topic for such a cartoony-looking game, well, you're right. Each enemy in the game can be spared if you perform the right actions in battle. These range from complimenting them, to petting them, to straight up ignoring them. Each battle becomes a small puzzle that you have to solve, and all for the reward of 0 experience points. This is a game that asks you to make your way through all of its challenges at level 1. When enemies attack you, and they will, they're not out here trying to make a point about non-violence like you are, you enter a mini-game where you have to move a tiny heart around inside a box to avoid their projectiles. It's sort of like a bullet hell kind of thing, but you don't have any way of fighting back. It can get pretty challenging, and even more so since, like I said, if you're playing as a pacifist, you're going to be at level 1 the whole way through. Even beyond the uniqueness of its battle mechanics, this game would deserve its place on this list because of how it makes you think about combat. Not about strategies, but about whether it's the right thing to do at all. The wrong thing to do would be to think that this game isn't worth giving a shot. It's a short and sweet experience that says a lot and will make you feel things. You've got to give it a try if somehow you haven't already. This one sort of slid under the radar, and I can kind of understand why. It's very strange. A name like Zonky Zero Last Beginning probably didn't do it any favors in winning over mainstream gamers, but I mean, obviously it wasn't trying to. This is a Spike Chunsoft game, and at its core, it's a dungeon crawler. I did not know this when I went into it. If I had, I'll be honest, at the time I might not have even given it a try. See, until more recently, I've shied away from dungeon crawlers for the most part, for all the typical reasons you hear from anti-dungeon crawler people. Don't like getting lost in mazes, too much grindy gameplay, don't like getting lost in mazes, often bland storylines, don't like getting lost in mazes, and then there's the whole thing with getting lost in mazes and how I don't like it. I've started to come around on them though, and Zanki Zero may have helped ease me in. So the plot of this one is as weird as the name. After the end of the world, 8 people wake up on an island in the middle of nowhere, and they have to follow commands issued to them from what appears to be a TV show of some kind hosted by a doe-eyed boy and a cartoon sheep. You learn pretty much right away that these 8 people are clones and they can only live for 13 days. They progress through every stage of life in that time, so they go from little kids to adults to senior citizens, and their apparent age has an impact on their abilities in battle. After 13 days, they can be recloned, so to speak, and start out as little kids again. Getting to the bottom of what's going on takes you on a pretty wild trip. Similar to another Spike Chunsoft masterpiece, Danganronpa, this one tackles some really dark subject matter through a very wacky Japanese lens. It can be very heavy, but the game never takes itself seriously enough that you end up feeling depressed about it. Like I said, it's a dungeon crawler, so you're going to find yourself guiding your characters through various dungeons and fighting monsters, but beyond basic exploration and combat, there's a ton more to do in this game if you want to. You can build out your base and make tools and weapons, which is pretty important because you have stats like hunger and thirst, and even the need to use the bathroom that you have to manage. However, if you're like me, and are really just in it for the story, which is the excuse you make because game too hard, then you can basically eliminate all of that extra stuff and plow through it in story mode. Zanki Zero is one of the most unique games out there, and it could only come from a company like Spike Chunsoft. If it piques your interest at all, you should definitely check it out. This is the oldest game on this list, and for a long time, it was definitely the weirdest game I'd ever played. At the time it came out, it's another one where I might have been hesitant to pick it up if I'd known more about it, just because I was such a fan of traditional JRPGs, and I didn't think that I was interested in games that operated outside of those standard rules. But The World Ends With You is a pretty special experience, especially for the moment in time that it originally released, and more people need to be talking about it. In The World Ends With You, you control Niku, one of those JRPG protagonists in the style of Squall from Final Fantasy VIII who doesn't give a crap about anyone, except he actually does. He's all about burying his feelings in his chest and his head and his headphones and tuning out the world. So Neku finds himself taking part in the Reaper's game, which means he's trapped in the real-life district of Shibuya in Tokyo and has to undertake missions. Failing means death. Neku's forced to participate while he tries to uncover exactly what the Reaper's game is and why he's being forced into it. In each of the game's chapters, he's teamed up with a new friend, and this is where the game's uniqueness really starts to shine. Battles in this game happen when you want them to for the most part, and once you engage with an enemy, you'll have to activate some sort of latent superpower in your brain because you're going to have to control 2 characters at the same time. In the original Nintendo DS release, Neku appears on the bottom screen and is controlled with the stylus, and Neku's friend is on the top screen controlled with the gamepad. Each of Neku's moves is carried out with different motions of the stylus, and each of his friend's moves is done with directional combinations. They share a health bar too, so you really can't afford to ignore one screen in favor of the other. It really feels like it should be impossible to play, but somehow those maniacs over at Square Enix pulled it off. It's a fast and frenetic masterpiece of a game, and it breaks almost every rule of JRPGs, many of which this company helped to establish. But that's what happens in real art. It's knowing the rules well enough to know how to break them in ways that feel intentional and masterful. We were lucky enough to get a sequel to this game not too long ago in Neo: The World Ends With You. I'm guessing it didn't do super well though, which is a bummer. Grab this game any way you can. The Switch remaster isn't perfect and it changes the gameplay quite a bit, but it'll do if that's all you have. But the DS version is really the epitome. It's pretty freaking incredible. Anyway, that's it. What did you think? Any games I missed? I'm assuming so, I always do. So please let me know down in the comments. If you liked this, would you mind liking the video? And subscribe if you like JRPGs and dorks like me who talk about them. I've got a Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel. It's not too pricey and we have a good time hanging out in Discord, so check it out if you feel like it. Until next time. Bye.